Why, hello everybody. My name is Steve Usher and a warm welcome to the Experienced Designers podcast. Why, hello everybody and welcome to episode 28 of the podcast. In this episode, we're going to delve a lot deeper and really practically actually into employee onboarding. Something which I'd say in the last few years has really been a topic that's been growing continuously. As we know, candidate experience will forever be there. But, once that candidate signs that contract and starts that journey or into your organization, what does that look and feel like? How does that impact how people think and feel about your organization, about your brand, about connecting into your people, into your culture? How can you make that easy? How can you intentionally design that as an experience? So in this episode, you'll meet Jamie Owen, who's been working specifically around onboarding, learning, and employee experience. And he shares his own journey and perspectives on how to create and build better onboarding experiences for new hires. So without further ado, let's jump in. So Jamie Owen, welcome to the Experienced Designers.
Thank you. It's really awesome to be here.
Good stuff. So let's jump in because we're talking about a very specific topic today. And I just want to throw some words at you first. Let's get started with some words.
Sure.
Unorganized, lacking consistency, poor experience, unclear, lacking connection, and one of my favorites, drinking from a fire hose. Kind of terms and words that are synonymous with organizations with a low maturity when we think about employee onboarding. So I'm super pleased that you've joined me today as we delve into this topic together, because it's something which I'm really curious to learn from you on how to maybe move that needle and help organizations move from this kind of immature state into a much more mature and much more experience-driven onboarding experience. Before we kind of jump in, let's delve a little bit more into your journey, Jamie. Where are you today? What kind of work do you do? And how on earth did you end up doing the extraordinary work that you're doing around onboarding journeys?
Yeah, right now I'm working for a tech company, and my whole role here was to develop an onboarding program. And the journey that I have taken to get to where I am today is maybe a little bit on the unique side. And if I go well way back when, I went to university and did an IT degree and then did a teaching qualification. So I was a school teacher, a high school teacher to start with. And then I realized that there was, I was destined to do something different. So I moved more into the ed tech space with a non-for-profit organization and helped them transition their paper-based learning into an online system. And then from there, I sort of went into the learning and development and then found my feet with the employee experience. And as we know, that learning development is part of the employee experience, and so is onboarding. It's part of the employee journey. So it was only natural for me to sort of move into onboarding as part of the employee experience.
Yeah, amazing. Definitely an educational red thread through your career, for sure. Yeah. So look, let's just jam on the industry really. If onboarding was an industry in its own, how would you describe like its evolution? How are we working with onboarding differently over the last 5-10 years? How have you seen it evolving?
Yeah, look, it used to be like a pat on the back and welcome. Sometimes you might get a coffee and sometimes you might get a breakfast. But what we have learned is that onboarding is just not about sort of welcoming you to the organization in front of your peers or in front of your team. It's really about embedding you within the organization and setting you up for success. So what I've uncovered through my many years, and I've changed jobs quite a few times. So I've gone through quite a few onboarding programs or lack thereof. So firsthand, I've been able to kind of experience what organizations are doing in onboarding. And it can last anywhere from a day to a week to a month, at most, at least in my experience. And it can be very, very different in terms of the sort of the manager's involvement as well. Sometimes managers are 100% on you and give you no space, and that's not a negative thing. They really want to support you. to the, I'm just going to let you go and deal with it yourself. So there's quite a long, sort of a long spectrum there. But what I've seen the most is that everybody wants to set you up for success in the organization. But you mentioned it in the intro, is that in part of your words, is that there's often a structure element that's left behind. And we are so concentrated on getting somebody into the job, getting them to do the work they're employed to do, that we often forget about the onboarding process. And onboarding is really about learning. It's about learning about the organization. It's about learning about the role. It's learning about your peers, but it's also about connections and establishing relationships.
In terms of like approach from a design perspective, what's kind of been your approach? Where would you kind of start, or where would you take it?
What I have learned is that every organization is different. We can follow the same recipe, but every organization has a different onboarding. There's not one company that could pick up an onboarding program and fully implement it into their own. It just wouldn't work. So what I have done, and the approach that I have taken, is I very much use a design thinking approach to developing an onboarding journey. So if you're familiar with design thinking, it's a very cool method to really embed yourself in the organization and hear from the organization what are some of the areas that need to be looked into. And one of the great things with design thinking is that you can kick it off with research. And whenever I go into any organization, it's basically part of my own onboarding, my own personal onboarding, is to research the company, find out what the current state of onboarding is in the organization, because there are a lot of good examples of onboarding elements throughout different organizations. So understanding the current state to build on, you don't have to throw the baby out with the bathwater, so to speak, but you can actually build on something that's already there. You can do that conducting interviews and asking people on the ground, asking the employees on the ground, what is it that makes onboarding so good? What did you miss? What would you have liked? And talk to different levels as well. So I talk to new hires, people within the first 3 months. I talk to people who had joined the organization the first 12 months, and talk to leaders as well. And I talk to different leaders as well, on the ground leaders, VP leaders, like get a real good stretch of different participants. And then you can look at other data as well, like what's your retention rate, what's your attrition rate, like what are they saying in exit interviews? So you can use all that to help build a narrative around what is the current state of onboarding. And one other really cool thing is obviously researching what other people, what other organizations are doing. Tap them on the shoulder. People love to share. I love to share. Find out what others are doing and find out what the best practice is.
Yeah, I agree. Let's unpick this, because I think there's a big element. The word research, in some organisations, I find is undervalued actually. And of course, in the work that we do, it centres around human-centric design. What are the needs of everybody that touches the onboarding journey? How have you found that in terms of that approach? And have you struggled at all? Had any blockers around from a research perspective, or getting those insights that you've had to overcome or challenge?
From an insight perspective, people really want to tell you their opinion. They really want to tell you their experience. And when you ask the question, and it's really important when you're asking these questions to keep it a little vague. Don't be so specific, or you will get specific answers, right? So the great thing is it's to ask relatively wide and open-ended questions, a little bit vague, to get them talking. And then from there, you can hone in on different elements that they're talking about. But people love talking about their experiences. And what I find is that, why don't we just call them frontline employees, like employees that are day to day doing the job. They're not sitting in headquarters. They're not in a leadership position. But if you ask frontline workers their opinion, they're going to tell you exactly what their challenges are. and they're able to give you first-hand accounts of challenges in the day-to-day job, not just how people and managers and people sitting in headquarters and things like that, not just what they think is happening, the actual on the job.
Yeah.
And it's really important as well to get the most clearest answers and to get the most, to get the source of truth. It's really important to make sure that that information is anonymous, and really stress that point, that information goes nowhere, that you're talking to X amount of individuals in the organization, and we're looking for patterns. So that's what I would stress about that.
That's super valid. Yeah, really great. From a buy-in perspective, and obviously the research element is a great opportunity to engage the business, engage those stakeholders, but also you may not have budget at that stage. How have you kind of used this kind of data and insight then to leverage, and how would you recommend people to use this maybe on a lo-fi level before going all in on a bigger project, to kind of just play with it and find ways in order to get that buy-in? And also just to tack into that as well, Jamie, around some of the metrics which you mentioned around retention. Metrics and obviously ROI and tying that in is crucially important to this as well. How would you kind of bring those together into then a package to be able to support some of your recommendations into an organization?
Yeah, so I guess the really cool thing is once you've gone through the design thinking process, and you've done your research and you've done your interviews, you've got your data, you can then start mapping, like I mentioned before, the current state. And one of the great things about mapping the current state is developing what is called in the sort of the employee experience world of an emotional journey map. Because you can't really argue with emotions, because that's how people feel. And what you want to do is you want to make sure that any negative emotions can be moved into a more of a positive emotion. One of the great tools that I've used as part of my design thinking and employee experience approaches is that you create an emotional journey map. So from all the research that you get, from all the insights you get, not so much from the best practice and what's happening out and what other organizations are doing, but what's happening in your organization, you can create an emotional journey map. And the idea behind that is you map out the processes from start to finish. So in onboarding, it could start very much at the contract is signed, before the first day, the first week. There could be a couple of processes in the beginning. And then the idea is that you then map on a scale of what your participants had said were they positive, were they negative? If you've got the processes as zero, then plus is above and minus is below. And then you can start to map some of the feelings and some of the emotions that are happening. So as an example, one of the journey maps I did was when a new person had signed the contract, they were very excited, really excited. That's a feeling. That's excited, and when they sign the contract, you want to be able to continue that excitement as far as you can. So and then signing the contract, that's excited. And then before their first day, they're curious. They're really curious to learn about their role and curious to learn more about the organization and a little bit more about the culture and who they'll be working with. So there's a very much an element there or emotion there of curiosity. And if I was to translate that into a desired state, because once you've got your current state, you know what it looks like in the organization now. Your desired state, which is the next phase in the design thinking approach, is to then map out how do we want this journey to look. So, for example, before their first day, pretty much says that we needed to implement some sort of pre-boarding, and introduce some sort of social elements, and introduce the networking element as well. Connect them with employees, connect them who they're going to be working with. Start that all early so they don't go and come into their first day, which was our third part of the emotional journey. They don't come in cold and unsure of who they're going to talk to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's one of the most, I find it's one of the most underrated moments actually, is pre-boarding. I know people kind of talk about it, but my narrative on this is the longer the notice period, the more you need to show up as a business. If it's a 2-week notice period, of course, it's much shorter. If it's 3 months, particularly in a tight talent market right now where you've got potential buybacks chipping away at the employee to stay. I kind of like to describe it as, how do you pick up someone's right foot and slowly put it over out of that organization and into your organization. I think it's a lovely moment in time or a period of time which you can actively design for. So I really support that. I think it's something which is often undervalued, and the importance of it is super important. And as you say, going back to that learning piece, how do you get people to start learning about your culture or your business in a much greater level of detail that kind of is more, got a bit more continuity to the candidate experience and their hiring journey? How do you build on some of that, your EVP or some of the content that they've already consumed? Yeah,
exactly. But there's a real fear there from organizations that we don't want them to be overwhelmed before they start. We want them to finish off their job. We want them to be in the right mindset when they join. But when people start their journey of looking for a new position, or they're contacted by a headhunter and they've been approached, their mindset starts to change already. And what you want to do is you want to continue that excitement, because there is going to be a bit of fear in that period. There is going to be, have I made the right decision? What you need to do as an organization is not only set them up running and so they don't come in first day cold, but you also need to solidify the choice that they've made and make them feel comfortable with that choice. Just because they've signed the contract doesn't necessarily mean they're going to turn up on day one. So that you also have to be careful about. And that's where that connecting the employees, you don't have to give them 50 hours of e-learning to do in that period. And please, hopefully that doesn't happen too often. But you don't have to give them tasks to do or work to do, but connect them and feed their interest. Ask them what would they like to know, what would they like to see before they join the organization, and set up a Q&A if they've got any questions. Like maybe it's like a 20-minute catch up before they start with the team, and maybe there's some questions there about the role. Like just feed that enthusiasm and that curiosity during the pre-boarding phase.
Yeah, and also goes back to what you were saying earlier about on the research phase is, maybe have a section in your research which is specifically about content or learning content. What would you like to learn in the pre-board phase that you didn't get when you joined us or in the first few weeks?
Exactly.
Those people that have joined recently. Ask those questions, and you'll definitely start to unearth okay, we actually got some already existing content. Just how do we then deploy it or share it along the journey? So we're definitely going to get into that stuff for sure. What did you find as part of the kind of the day one, week one, as we go kind of further along the journey? What was your findings and some of your experiences as you're looking at this part of people's experiences?
Yeah, so mostly the first day is quite social in the sense where you are meeting people, maybe not for the first time, but you are meeting people in a more formal setting. It's in your new work environment. So there's day one is basically very, very social. And a lot of times the new hire will spend sort of one-on-ones with different people in the team and their manager. There have been some cases in my research in different organizations that sometimes the manager wasn't even available on day one, and that could be for a variety of reasons. But one of the desired state elements of the first day that we identified was that before you join the organization, most of your contact is with the manager. And you've obviously got a really good vibe off the manager, because if you had a bad vibe, then maybe you won't join the organization. But the general assumption is that you've had a good relationship with the manager. So it's really important to continue that even on day one. So one of the desired states is make sure that the manager is there on day one. Make sure that the manager has blocked out 1 or 2 hours to go through things like the role and expectations, and setting them up with onboarding for the onboarding period as well, like where to go, and then setting them up with some initial connections. So the manager element is really important on the first day, as is the buddy. Now, we haven't mentioned the buddy element, but everyone needs a buddy. And they actually say in the research, everyone needs a best friend at work. This may or may not be your buddy. It just depends on how well you click. But you have the manager. The manager is very formal. Okay, this is your role. These are my expectations. The buddy is like, this is how we book travel, and this is what I do when we book travel so that we get really good deals. And so the buddy is there as a support mechanism for pretty much everything. will allow the new hire to be introduced to sort of how the work is done as well. There are some good and some bad things around that. There might be some bad traits that the buddy that might have, but in general, the research indicated that most buddies take this as an opportunity to strive in a leadership type role. So they take the role very seriously. So that's one of the things to think about when selecting a buddy. Not only is their knowledge, but also think about somebody who is thinking about leadership or wants some additional responsibility, because it is an additional time on their shoulders, an additional task that they will need to do.
Yeah, agreed. I know there's been I know some organisations that won't have buddies. I know some others that are really into it. I think just setting up the policy of it and what it actually means to be a buddy, and also the responsibility, how to engage, even some support around how to do that. How long do you think buddies should be in place for? Always a question I do get, actually. What's your thoughts?
So what we were thinking is that the idea behind the buddy is that they are there for a significant amount of time. The research says, and I'll allude a little bit to more about the process and the structure, but the research says that an onboarding program should go for about 90 days, 3 months, first 3 months of their life. However, the research also says that there should be a continuous supporting function for the first 12 months. So the buddy's official role and the official tasks are attached to the onboarding. And what I'm doing in some of the work that I'm undertaking is looking at how that buddy can be connected in the next in that sort of 3 to 12 month period. So when you say how long a buddy should be a buddy, how long is a piece of string? So it's a little bit like that, but definitely they need to be around for that 90 days and connected. They actually need to be connected to the onboarding, not just sort of, oh, you're a buddy for, Joe Blogs, away you go. Like, there needs to be guidance, like you said, support. What do they need to do? Checklists. There needs to be check-ins with the manager to find out, is everything going okay? There needs to be check-ins with new hires, not just ad hoc, but then there needs to be a serious plan thought about after the onboarding for the first 12 months. So if you stick to the best practice, 90 days for your onboarding, and then the next phase is sort of that 3 to 12 month period, there needs to be activities, professional development plans, and the buddy also needs to be linked into that as well.
Yeah. Have you experimented or worked with kind of cohorts as well, in terms of, obviously, with organizations that are maybe scaling, or they're bringing multiple people at one time from different functions?
Yeah, it's a really good question. It goes back to organizing these networking and these connections. And you are right. There is a lot of, there are a lot of people starting within the same time period. It's really great to have them connect and share their experiences and learn from each other. So some of the things we've thought about are different types of, let's call them orientations. Basically, it's an opportunity to get all your new hires together in one place. Sometimes they're conducted monthly, sometimes they're conducted quarterly. But the idea behind them is to bring them together, to learn a little bit, to share a little bit, and to network together. One of the things that I sort of try to discourage in the conversations I have are around the death by presentation. So an individual standing up and typical lecture style, talking about different things. You can get that information to the individuals or to the new hires another way. You don't have to bring them together just for that. But maybe you might want them to work on something to take away and embed it in their job. And I'll give you an example. So let's talk about leaders. So as a leader, as a new leader in an organization, there's a lot of extra layer of things that you need to learn other than the history, culture, and who to go to for support. One of the things that they need to do is recruitment. Another thing is budget. So there's just a couple of examples there. What I tend to recommend and talk about is, when you have new leaders start, don't just have the head of talent come up and give a presentation on how to do a recruitment plan and how we do recruitment in this organization. that can actually be done as an online learning module, either pre-work, or even they could have it as a resource at the time of need. Because let's just say leaders come in at different times and recruitment happens at different areas. One of the things I suggest in terms of getting these people together in an orientation is actually have them come in and develop a recruitment plan. And as they're developing the recruitment plan for their own area, they can then go through the recruitment process. They can draw on the talent acquisition specialists that could be in the room to support them, and maybe spend an hour, hour and a half, or whatever the timing allows, to actually develop a product that they can then take away and embed in their organization. So that's just one example of
I love that.
that sort of cohort together. And there are different ways to do the cohorts as well. There is that example. There is also a little bit like I've seen one example called speed dating, where you would have a group of people just go around to different individual heads of departments simply to find out what they're doing. Now, you could do that in a different way as well. You could do a video and then have someone talking. But how awesome is it if you've got speed dating and they tell you what you do, and then as a new hire, you can shoot back questions straight away. So there's different ways of doing it, and it's orientation, boot camp. There's different levels as well.
I saw a lovely example of a company in France who, they used their cohorts brilliantly. They actually created design workshops, facilitation work. They facilitated them. And I really support this. Anyone listening, I would just say, really genuinely think about this, is anybody new into an organization in the first, month, 2 months is like free consultancy. Like, they see beyond your norms, all those automatic things that your brain processes when you walk into your office that you don't see. Oh, it's quite messy in this area, or whatever's kind of going on from a process point of view, So I just find there's a great way, if there's an opportunity to use the cohort in a way that brings value to the organization. You do it in a really fun, engaging way where they get to learn more about each other. And then, there's nothing more satisfying than producing some potential solutions for an organization and bringing value quickly and being recognized for that as well.
Exactly. Yeah. There's a really cool process called the Lightning Decision Jam, developed by AJ and Smart. And again, you in an hour and a half, you can get all these ideas and solutions up on the board, and then practical examples which they can then take back into their organization and try out for 2 weeks. So it's there are some really cool ideas there around.
I agree. And if anybody listening hasn't heard of it, it's called the LDJ, or Lightning Decision Jam. I've also renamed it Lightning Discovery Jam as well. I've used it with new hires that have come in, and literally facilitate it as a first iteration process, to use it as an opportunity to iterate on what we've designed. But it's so cool. I mean, it's really easy to facilitate. So just Google it. There's some really good YouTube tutorials from AJ and Smart actually on it. So I'll put the links in the show notes for people. So look, Jamie, just out of interest, because I'm also curious, let's bring back on as well this learning piece, because I know you're really big on this. How have you approached learning? So when people are moving out of this kind of onboarding phase and then start to kind of assimilate more into their own function or role, how have you approached that? How would you recommend people start to think about that? And at what point actually do you start learning? Do you pull the carpet right up from day one, or does it kind of evolve? I'd love to just hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, it's a really, really cool question. I am quite passionate about this particular area because I've worked at a few organizations, and one of the things I remember from one particular organization is that on my day one, I had about 20 emails from their automated LMS telling me that I needed to watch all of these online learning materials, which from my memory was very much a sort of a click and flick. You do it to say, hey, I'm compliant in this particular area, and then away you go. And there's very little application to your actual role. Like, how this is very generic, developed for 50,000 employees, but how is it generic, or how is it personalized to my role? So there's an element of personalized learning experiences here as well. It takes a little bit more work to do that, but one of the things we thought about was creating learning challenges. And the idea behind learning challenges is that they are given a scenario, and this is, and you talked about, the time frame of when this starts, and I'm just going to step one back a little bit and go back. So we've talked about the first day. The first day is hectic. Don't think they're even going to check an email on their first day. Like, there's lots of people they'll be meeting, so they won't really get to it like until their second or their third day. And if they've got AT problems, it might even take a little bit longer into the week. So the learning about actual content, how to apply things that you're going to learn to your role, in our experience of the process, normally doesn't sort of take place until sometime later in the first week, maybe even in the second week of the role. So I'll just point that out and then move into this learning challenge concept. So the learning challenges is you, for a particular role. So let's just say, I work in recruitment. And one of the learning challenges could be to learn about the organisation in a way that I needed to help develop a recruitment plan for an area in the organisation. And then what you do with this learning challenges is you provide them with connections, who they need to talk to, what areas of the business they need to find out. So, for example, say it's part of maybe they develop software and they're part of the product development unit, for example. So they would need to learn about the product development, how that works, who's the head of that, how is that split up. So then all of a sudden they need to contact these people and learn about how the organization works before they even look at the recruitment plan.
Yeah.
And then not to mention that, well, maybe how you do a recruitment plan is different to how we do a recruitment plan. So let's find out if your idea is better than our idea. Like there's different ways you can skin that as well. So,
Nice.
but the purpose of the learning challenges is not just to sit in front of a computer and watch endless amounts of learning materials or look through the employee handbook or look through the org chart to find out who's what. It's actually saying, get off your seat, go out there and talk to people, learn about the organization, and then create something that is tailored to a particular area. And it could be a simulation, which then they present to their manager and their buddy, and they get feedback and go through that whole process. Or it could be a real task. This is one of the tasks that you will need to do. You need to talk to X, Y, Z. They need a recruitment plan. They're about to recruit 30 people in their area. And maybe here's your buddy. So it's all about linking this all together.
Yeah, that's really nice. I like that a lot. There's some organizations, certain functions align into others more than others. They'll communicate more. So the sooner you get them aligning into those or building relationships through those kind of learning journeys, the better. So it's much more contextual, isn't it? Rather than this kind of holistic learning on an overall kind of arching business perspective, which is important, of course, because it's good to understand holistically.
I'm a big fan of the 70-20-10 model as well. So this also draws on that element, because I won't explain the 70-20-10, but if you're sitting in front of a computer screen, you're not really being social and you're not really applying your craft to the actual business. So and of course, don't get me wrong, we need to be able to go through the compliance and we need to be able to tick off that we are compliant. But all we're really doing in that aspect is we're ticking off that we have watched an online learning. The business can say, oh, yep, we've done this. But there needs to be that link. And I draw on the leaders in the organization. For example, my manager, they need to be able to draw that link between what that is and how that affects me and my role and how I can be a success to the organization by knowing that information. And then how do I use that information going forward? So if you work in a bank and you're learning about risk management or some sort of cybersecurity in any organization, where do you go to next from that? Talk to a cybersecurity people, go and connect with IT, and then work out how this affects you in your business. So there's actually an application task after the learning aspect as well.
Yeah, that's brilliant. I really like the playback to the buddy and the hiring manager. I really like the sound of that, because it puts the onus on the new hire to initiative and to go, just, as you say, get off out your chair and just get connecting and learning in real time. That's contextual. but also, managers are busy enough. I know, just saying this out how it is, to put there can put always the onus on the manager that they should be leading these things or guiding always is sometimes unrealistic for certain businesses and hiring managers. So actually to just be in the moment for them to play back and then have an opportunity to guide and coach and align, having already been presented some content and some their perspective of what they've learned, I think it's a really, really nice way of doing it, actually. It's really, really nice.
And like I said before, like we encourage the manager to be involved, but you are right, they are busy. But that's also why you have a buddy to help. The buddy not only supports the new hire, they also support the manager. So there are things there which the manager can lean on. And it doesn't always have to be the manager involved in these sorts of things. It could be maybe a couple of senior colleagues from the team as well. If you're developing a simulated recruitment plan, in this example, bring someone in from the business who has recruited before and get them to provide feedback as well. You probably wouldn't do it in the first month. You would give the new hire some space to to get comfortable. So maybe you might do that later on. But there's no problem with bringing people in from the business to provide feedback. And that's what you want. You want that feedback. Oh, that's an interesting point. We haven't done that before. Maybe we can take that. So you're learning something from the new person, but also, we actually don't follow that particular protocol. We follow this one. So could you map it into the way the organization does? So it's also a two-way feedback.
And also, if you look at some of if we go back to a research grounded based on the needs of new hires, one of the fundamentals is feedback and guidance. I mean, it's a crucial component of that first orientation, onboarding, whatever you want to call it. So Jamie, I just want to jump into as well, because I think onboarding in terms of deployment, in terms of actually taking your onboarding from where it is to actually deploying out a new enhanced future state, can be tricky. And I just wanted to just delve into that around your approach, so it's not seen, and above all doesn't lose steam in the sense of it's just seen as a one-off project, because as we know, hiring managers come and go and it can get eroded pretty quickly. So what's your thoughts there? What's some of the pitfalls or things you'd recommend around deployment or areas to really focus on?
I'm a pretty big change management type of person when I work in sort of any sort of space. And from the onboarding perspective, what I've learned is that you really need to use the managers or the leaders as your change drivers. And in order for them to be your change drivers, you need to bring them into the conversation quite early. So when you're doing your research, when you're doing your interviews, yes, you want to find out what the new hire's experience is like, but you also need to get the managers involved in that conversation as well. And then you can use them throughout the entire process. You can also use I also mentioned interviewing people that had been in the first 12 months. You can also use them as they should be established. That's the assumption. So you can also use them, but your leaders are definitely your change drivers. Great. So getting them involved early, getting them involved in the project, getting their insights, making sure that if you've got a collection of common insights, make sure that it is highlighted and you can ask them for permission, but highlight those individuals by name as well. Like, XYZ said this, and provide that recognition to the organization that they are contributing to the project. And what I have found is that allows them to have a stronger sense of buy-in. And when you go through the change process, they are normally happy to continue with the change. And what I would say in addition to this is that you need onboarding champions embedded throughout the organization. So use the people that you were used in the interview as champions or ambassadors, whatever phrase you want to call them, but make sure they're they're not just involved in the first phase, they're involved in the continuous development and communication of the process. You mentioned design sprints before. I use design sprints as part of this approach to not only discover what are some of their insights, but also for them to come up with solutions. Okay, you said that your manager is time poor. You just don't have time to do some of the ideas that we're suggesting. What are some of the solutions you can come up with time poor? And hear from them. And then when you change the program and build the program based on their insights, it's just a lot easier of a journey.
Yeah.
And keeping that feedback loop open, if and testing, and have those people, those leaders tested in their organization. You've got a new person coming in next month, great, let's test the onboarding. And I created, as part of the onboarding experience, I basically, every phase this new person started with this manager, we were developing on the fly. So we didn't have a full onboarding program finished. We had the pre-boarding done, and then once they were in the pre-boarding, then we're like, right, now we need to get on a first day and the first week. And then they started their first day and they had their first day stuff. Then they had their first week stuff. And then while that was going on, we were still developing the first month stuff as well. And we were testing live and getting feedback all the time. And it was okay for the manager to say, now listen, you're going to be our test bunny. We are testing our new onboarding on you. So you need to give us feedback. And it's a little like putting down the shields as well, because they're like, oh, they're doing this. Oh, it's okay if it's not right. And I'm giving feedback to the overall program. It's really about involving those individuals and the leaders in that process.
All the way through. Nice. Really nice. Goes back to what we said earlier in the conversation, is this importance of research, and it can be used to engage and to bring people to the start of the journey. It doesn't need to be something that's in isolation. It's part of the change journey as well. So I think it's a crucial part. Exactly. So Jamie, just one last area I just want to cover off, tech, because we've covered about kind of people. We've done a bit around process. Tech is also, I've left it to last on purpose because obviously it's important, but people are first in my mind anyway. Yeah. Humans first, please. And then obviously process. But then it's, tech, and it's an enabler for sure.
Yes.
How have you leveraged tech from an onboarding perspective? We've got some specialist providers out there. You've got it as part of a module of a wider HRIS system. I guess sometimes it's just what you have to leverage to its best.
Yeah, and you've used the right word there, enable, because you are right. It is about the people, the connections. It is about the process, the structure, and the tech. Honestly, tech is seriously an enabler. And sometimes it can be a positive experience, and sometimes it can be a negative experience. But I guess when I talk about, I probably won't talk about tech in specifics, because like you said, if you've got a HR system, chances are you've got an onboarding component. There are other onboarding platforms that are out there that do different things and offer different things as well. I think what I found is that you need some sort of central location for everyone to go. Now, it could be a website, it could be a certain product that everybody uses for their intranets. It could be an intranet page. It could be based on their phone, which would be great. It could be a collection of videos in a very famous video management system. So I guess the most important thing is think about the user experience when you are implementing your people-first, process-orientated onboarding program. And one of the important things is making sure that, for example, in a 90-day structure, which is what I advocate for, making sure that 90 days is a seamless experience. If you've got it on a web page, then have it very, very clearly identified the phases, what are the resources. Make sure that it's up to date as well. So don't have 50 people in the organization updating this particular page. Make sure you've got an owner, not only just an owner for the site, but also make sure you've got an owner for the onboarding program. Okay, it can't just be a side project. We've gone to great lengths in organizations to establish different areas of the organization to support them from a people and culture perspective. Onboarding is no different, and it should be given the time and the respect that it certainly deserves. So having someone to own that is really important, because then that person can be in control of the updates. If people leave, they can update the org chart, like those sorts of things. I think the other thing is, from the user perspective, is making sure that it's very seamless, so that the new hire knows exactly where they are in the process and what they needed to do. So no sort of jumping around, but very clear process identified, and then from that process, what needs to be done in each phase. So if we just, for example, go with pre-boarding as a phase, first day, first week, first month, second month, third month, what activities need to be completed in those elements? And then from there, you can point them off to the LMS that you're using or external resource that you've curated. But the most important thing is seamless journey.
Yeah, agree.
Oh, and automation. If you've got a system that can do automation, one of the biggest challenges we found through some of the research was that, again, managers do not have time. We have so much to do in our daily lives that if you can automate this process as much as possible, so select a system which connects to your Active Directory. As soon as someone signs the contract, is there an automatic function that can shoot off the pre-boarding? And normally pre-boarding is done with their private email, normally. And then when they join on their first day, it's done with their company email. So making sure that the software can also connect that journey together, because they may not finish the pre-boarding journey in their pre-boarding phase. They may need to finish it off during their first week. You want that connected. And also they might want to go back. So making sure that element is connected. But automation is, if you can automate this as much as possible, you will save a resource there sitting, typing names, adding people to the system, and then telling them what date they're going to start and when they're going to do all their different phases. So yeah.
Agree. And I'd also even encourage, just final section of the piece on this is, if you've done your research and you've mapped your current state and you're moving into the future state and you haven't selected, or it may just coincide with you looking at some kind of onboarding system, it's a lovely way to go to those suppliers and say, hey, we've already mapped it. We know exactly our needs, our user needs. Where can you help us show up where we need to? I think is also incredibly time well spent as well. Definitely.
Exactly. And I think my only final comment on that is, if you're able to take your pain points to that organization, also get them to demonstrate how they can solve that. Because a lot of the times you might hear from vendors, yes, we can do that. Yes, we can do that. But actually have them demonstrate that according to your process. Sometimes you might need to change one of your processes or something in your process to match the system. That's just the old 80-20 rule, and that's fine. But get them to demonstrate what is it that this is our pain point. How would you solve that with your system, and get them to show you?
Yeah, great tips. Top tips for moving forward. What would you say tips to people who've listened to this podcast and want to do something with onboarding? What would you share today?
Definitely start off with collecting your data. Know where you stand. Know what your current state is. Know what you're dealing with, because that will support you. And the change program might actually be easier if you've got a nice solid foundation which to build on. Make sure you're providing that support and those connections in the pre-boarding and in the first week, but make sure that continues out through the entire onboarding program. Create a structure. Like I said, I'm a big advocate of the 90 days, but remember that about the post 90 days as well. And don't squeeze everything into the first month. That is our biggest fear, that we want them to know everything within that first month. No. Work out when you need to stretch that out. You've got 90 days. And then if you've done a post 90 day, you've got even more time. So allow the new hire to guide and fall into the role. Brilliant. Personalize. If you can personalize, fantastic. So different tracks for different roles or departments. And just remember that if you have a really solid onboarding program, it can actually help drive your brand, and you can actually use it as part of the attraction phase and as part of the job description, as part of the selling. Because like we know, it's very hard to get top employees into organizations right now. It's very, very competitive.
Absolutely. So, Jamie, thank you so much for joining me on the show. Some really good practical tips. I'm really glad you agreed to join. I think, getting into the trenches and really getting into the practical elements. So, thank you for sharing your journey and experience. It's been great having you on, mate. Thanks ever so much.
It's been an absolute pleasure. Thanks so much,
man. Thank you. Cheers.
And
there you have it. Another episode of The Experienced Designers done. Thank you so much to my guest, Jamie Owen. I really do appreciate your contribution to the show, and of course, all the great insights and learning that you shared during the episode. And for those that want to delve a little bit deeper, please do jump into all of the resources that Jamie shared, which will be located in the show notes, along with links to connect with Jamie himself. So that's it for this episode. Again, thank you so much to you, our listeners. We really do appreciate you. And of course, all of the brilliant likes and shares that we've been receiving recently. It's been really great to see, and we're looking forward to bringing you more episodes in the very near future. So look out for those. Thank you again. See you next time.